GALP.
Oh, I'm so tired. Time to wind down with an egg sando and a strong zero.
ポイントカードはお持ちですか？袋はいりますか？
Don't be like our boy Gaza. Be prepared next time you're in Japan and use a translation app. Get Wi-Fi coverage across Japan, eSIM, and mini router rental with Ninja Wi-Fi. Trusted by 21 million customers worldwide, Ninja Wi-Fi provides great service for an affordable price. Visit ninjawifi.com and use the code GAL for 20% off.
この番組はグランドスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
People want to know my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch 2, and you know what? I'm going to give it to you, but I'm going to give it to you after this disclaimer. For you new folks, GALP is a weekly gaming discussion podcast on the GALP Podcast Network. We talk about all sorts of games from big AAA titles all the way to awesome indie games. But our forte is Japanese games, so expect that a lot. We can be found anywhere where you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube. Whilst you're there, be sure to give us a 5-star review. And remember, if you want to join in on the fun, then follow us on all of our socials. That's Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, and X, all at Gal Podcast. In addition to that, if you want to be an absolute legend, what you can do, let us get to number 1 JRPG podcast. We're currently number 29 worldwide. We want to get to number 1. So share this podcast around with everyone, including your nan. All right. And you know what? Let me know what your nan thinks. Tweet me. And, you know, if your nan loves the podcast, then yeah, just go on her phone and just give us a 5-star rating from your nan's iPhone. All right. All right. Let's talk about the Nintendo Switch 2. Nintendo has always been known as the family-friendly console, a family's best choice since back in the day, I'd say, to be fair with you, since they were sort of marketing the Nintendo Entertainment System not as a games console, but as an entertainment system, and I believe they started selling it in toy stores. So, you know, they kind of started that trend. Anyway, Nintendo Switch 2 is apparently Nintendo's fastest selling console of all time. I got a press release from Nintendo recently. Let me find it. Nintendo Switch 2 sets record, selling over 3.5 million units globally in the first 4 days. The new, more powerful console is the fastest selling Nintendo hardware ever. Congratulations, Nintendo. That's actually quite surprising, actually, because, well, it was very difficult to get the console, and they're talking about this from, you know, retail sales, and there's a lot of scalping going on as well, even in Japan, which is quite surprising. The lottery system didn't do quite well in Japan, but I didn't actually find it that difficult to get a Nintendo Switch 2. You can actually go into a store, especially if you live in Europe, especially if you live in the UK. It was incredibly easy. I got mine from Argos, which I don't like shopping at Argos, to be fair, and I didn't actually get my Argos, if you're listening, I didn't get my Nectar points for that purchase. Do you not get Nectar points for like games purchases at Argos? I'm sure you do, because when I bought Assassin's Creed, haven't even played it. I think I played like an hour of it and I got a little bit bored of it, to be fair. That new Assassin's Creed game, Shadows, when I bought that at Argos, I got Nectar points for it. So I didn't get my Nectar points for the Nintendo Switch 2, and I'm a little bit annoyed about that, because that's a lot of Nectar points. And you know what I do? I turn those Nectar points into Avios points, and I use them to fly. Anyway, that's just me. That's like, I'm obsessed with Avios. And I wish they'd sponsor. Oh man, if I can get British Airways or like Qatar Airways to sponsor the podcast, I'd be laughing. But anyway, besides the point, I don't know why I went on that tangent. Oh yeah, I bought it from Argos. So yeah, I bought mine from Argos, and literally on the day of release, I bought one, and it technically said it would be available same day shipping. It took like 4 days to ship it to me, and the Argos is literally right around the corner from my house. I could have just picked it up, but no, I waited for the shipping like a mug. Anyway, besides the point. So I got my Nintendo Switch on like Saturday of release week, and I got the Mario Kart World bundle, which, you know what, Mario Kart World is quite fun. It's a very fun game. Free roaming is really cool. What I love about racing games is the ability to free roam. It's always been my favorite part of racing games, right? Whether it's Need for Speed, whether it's like Burnout, or whatever racing game it may be, even Forza. I'm a huge fan of just free roaming, and you could do that in Mario Kart World, and it's just nice. to do. It gets a little bit boring and it gets a little bit repetitive. There's multiplayer as well, which I haven't got to experience yet. I did renew my Nintendo Switch Online, which I have access to GameCube games now because I got the expansion pack, and I also bought that as a family pack. One thing that I am really impressed about, and a lot of people, there's so much misinformation on the Nintendo Switch 2 at the moment, and it's been like a little bugbear for me. I need to mention it. A lot of people are like, I'm not paying $30 for Breath of the Wild upgrade or whatever. First of all, the upgrade is like $10, all right? It's like £7 in the UK for the Breath of the Wild update or Tears of the Kingdom, right? If you already own these games as a cartridge, paying £15 for both of them is decent, right? Because let's remember, on the PS5, when that launched, people were charging, full price for these updates, or at least £20 to £30. I've seen some even go for 40. Nintendo is selling it for 7. And guess what? If you have the Nintendo Switch Online expansion, you get it for free. No one mentioned that. No one actually mentioned that. I only realized that by mistake, right? Because I went in on the Nintendo Switch Online just to see the GameCube games on offer, and it just popped up and it was like, hey, you could download the Switch 2 versions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom for free because you have the expansion pack. And so I did. Didn't get to play with them yet because I lost my cartridge for Tears of the Kingdom, and I don't want to, and I'll be honest with you here, I do not want to buy a new cartridge for Tears of the Kingdom, because think about it. The Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 cartridge is still priced at £50. Everyone, like, those games don't devalue for some reason. And then the Switch 2 version is $60. So it's like, I might as well buy the Switch 2 version, even though I get the upgrade for free. So I know it's somewhere in my house. I just need to find it. So yeah, I'll go and find Tears of the Kingdom. I haven't tried Breath of the Wild yet. I want to kind of play the rest of the games on there. Yeah, I've been playing Mario Kart World a lot. There is a Rune Factory, the new Rune Factory game that I haven't tried yet. We've got a review code for it. Going to play it, and I'm going to give you guys a full review on the podcast, as well as Nobunaga's Ambition. I believe it's called Complete Edition, which we have reviewed the original Nobunaga's Ambition. Well, I can't remember which Nobunaga's Ambition number we're on at the moment, but the most recent Nobunaga's Ambition, we did a review on GALP before, and that was for the PS5 version. But I'm very excited to play this Nobunaga's Ambition game on the Switch 2, because I believe it's going to support the mouse controls, which is really cool. And I believe also you can use a mouse. You can just plug in a normal mouse and use it that way. But I want to use the actual mouse function on the Switch controller, Joy-Cons, as they call them. Yeah, Joy-Cons. Oh, let's jump into that. Now that we're talking about Joy-Cons, they are much nicer than the Switch 1 Joy-Cons. They're bigger. Of course, the console is slightly bigger as well. But I don't know. I'd say it's like the size of a Steam Deck, but a lot thinner. But in general, I prefer the Switch 2 Joy-Cons. The buttons feel nicer. I don't feel like I'm going to break it, and it doesn't feel like a little pin like shoving into my thumb every time I press it, like these Switch 1 Joy-Cons. They are just as expensive as Switch 1 Joy-Cons, if not even more expensive. And they use very similar sensors and gyros and whatever, or potentiometers, that the Switch 1 Joy-Cons use. So it is susceptible to drift, and some people are already reporting drift on them. Obviously, drift can happen for a number of reasons. One of the reasons could be dust and debris, which if you look at the Joy-Con itself, like, not a lot of the stick is protruding, and it has like a little dust cover around it. You might notice it. It's like a little ring. And I think probably that was Nintendo's solution to prevent dust and debris getting into the potentiometer and the actual stick itself. But people are reporting stick drift, and I believe, as always, Nintendo is offering to repair any consoles affected by stick drift and whatnot, which is pretty cool. To be fair, I don't use the Joy-Cons. I use the Pro controller, which, to be fair with you, I really love this Pro controller. I have the original Switch 1 Pro controller, and one thing that I don't like about the Switch controllers in general and the Nintendo controllers in general is that the buttons aren't clicky. Like, they're very soft and a little bit bouncy, and I don't know what to think about that. Like, playing hack and slash games, it is kind of decent as well, because it means you can make more inputs quite quickly, and not as, like, you don't really hear the button mashing as much as like a PlayStation controller. And it is quite nice. and like matte finish. It's not glossy. I don't know. And I think it's just, even the sticks are very like smooth, and the triggers are like, I don't know. It's a very smooth controller, and you've got like these paddles at the bottom as well, which is very interesting because the Xbox controller doesn't have that, and the PlayStation controller doesn't have that unless you buy more premium controllers. But the Switch has that as standard. You also have a headphone jack and a USB-C charging port, which I believe was on the previous controllers. It is worth noting that the previous generation controllers do work for Switch 2. I have not tried third-party controllers. I do have a few. I've got an 8-bit do adapter, which I don't think will work with Switch 2. And I also have the Retro Fighters Defender controllers as well, which do work with Switch 1. I'm not sure if they work with Switch 2. I haven't checked. And I really don't want to check. Retro Fighters is producing something for the Switch 2. It might be the case that they will also do like updates, but I don't know. So go and follow them if you want to check that out. We're not sponsored by them, but I do prefer their controllers for the Nintendo Switch because they're pretty versatile, because I use them for the PlayStation 2, and it also has a little dongle for the Switch and PC and whatnot. But anyway, that's not the point. The controllers are great. They're really fun. And I like the fact that they click like with magnets as opposed to the rail. The rail system was so annoying on Nintendo Switch 1. One downside with the magnet system is obviously we mentioned that there is no Hall effect there. And most likely the fact that there is no Hall effect sticks is probably because you have magnets in the controller that would kind of affect Hall effect. So it wouldn't be as good or as useful in that case. There are other types of sticks that don't have stick drift that Nintendo could have used, but really we don't know. Yeah, as I was saying, the controllers are great. They're fun to use, and it's just, oh, that clicking motion is just great. And I love the fact that it's magnets as opposed to the rail system. The rail system used to annoy me, and it was so ugly because if you used to play your Switch like me, those rails get degraded quickly because you're taking off them Joy-Cons. And I remember I had this issue with my Switch 1, and it was every Switch 1 that I had has this issue, right? Where maybe not so much the OLED, but the original Switch 1, I had the Smash Bros edition, you know, when Smash Bros came out and whatnot. And it was like after a while, and I think this was maybe like after a month, the rails of the Joy-Con just were wobbly. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, I put the Joy-Cons on and I feel like I could snap them off, kind of like you could do with the Switch 2, but it's not designed for that. And then it happened with my second Switch 1. I had to send that off for insurance. The insurance had to write it off because they were like, what the hell is wrong with this? Like, there was so many problems with it. And obviously I then got my OLED Switch because of it. I didn't have that issue with the OLED, but I'm still very hesitant with the OLED. I was like, speaking of OLED, the screen is an LCD screen. It's not an OLED. I have a feeling Nintendo is going to release like an OLED version in the future, and potentially a Switch to Lite potentially as well, to kind of keep costs down, because this console is very expensive for what it is. It's like a £500 console with a game. And that's one of the things that I think, yes, if you want to take inflation costs into it, it is quite cheap in comparison to the original Nintendo, in comparison even to the PlayStation 2, in comparison to the PlayStation 3, which was like £600 at launch back in 2006, which was a hell of a lot of money back then, you know, and even if you put it in today's standards, it's a lot of money. So if you want to compare it that sense, yeah, it is, you know, it is cheaper, but there is a cost of living crisis going on, and people are making memes where it's like, oh, my groceries are so expensive this month. And it's just like, oh, the Nintendo Switch 2 is in the bag with the groceries. But it is true. Like, it is a very expensive console for what it is. And I kind of hope Nintendo just does a price reduction in the same way that they've done with the Japanese market, where they've offered, you know, the Japanese version, which at a cheaper price, which for all intents and purposes, the Japanese version and the multi-language version is the exact same console. There's no difference in console. It's just like a sort of rebate or reduction in price by Nintendo for the Japanese market, because I believe they kind of did them a little bit dirty with the Japanese market in the past. But regardless, back onto the point, it is an expensive console, and I think, you know, the prices should go down to be fair. Yeah, I would like to see the prices go down. And even then, you can't really trade in your Switch 2 for a decent price. Like if you were to trade in your Switch 2 OLED at CEX, they'd give you £70 for it, when you can buy a brand new Switch OLED for 300 in the UK, which is kind of insane. So trade-ins aren't like what they used to be. And you know, like I remember you can go into a game. You can't even do that anymore. You can't even go into a game and trade in anymore. You go into a game or a game station and actually trade in your games and make a decent profit off of it. But you can't really do that now anymore. It's kind of dead. But besides the point, so there is no really path to upgrading the Switch 2. It would be nice if Nintendo had a program where you could trade in your Switch 1 for a Switch 2 and get like a discount or a subsidy, but they're not going to do that because then they'll be left with a lot of Switch 1s. What the hell are they going to do with that? They might sell them off to like outlets, shops, or like secondhand shops or whatever. I really don't know, but yeah, what are they going to do with that many Switch 1s, to be honest? Nintendo were a little bit brazen before when people were like, oh, it's expensive, and they were like, well, guess what, you can buy a Switch 1. They didn't phrase it like that. They were a bit nicer in the way they said it, but it kind of gave off that vibe that they were like, oh, you can't afford a Switch 2? Well, there you go. You know, like that sort of mentality. I don't even want to say it, but it's like better than thou type thing. Anyway, the pricing is something that I hear a lot, but it will go down. It will regulate itself. A lot of people are like complaining about prices of games as well. They're like, oh my God, £70 games. There's only one £70 game or £80 game really, and that's Mario Kart World. But if you're going to be buying the Switch 2, you're going to be buying it in a bundle anyway, and then the game works out to be like £40 when you're buying it in the bundle. And a lot of the launch titles I've seen are not priced at £70, even for, you know, titles that are basically brand new IPs and things, or existing IPs. Like Street Fighter is not £70. I think it's like at most 60, but you could probably find it for 50, which is the price for every other game. And then give it a couple of months, it'll go down to like 40 or 30 or even £20, like every Switch game in existence. It's the same with Rune Factory. Rune Factory, I think you can find for 50, you know, which is a decent price for a brand new game on the Switch 1 and Switch 2, and you can play on both consoles. They do work. And yeah, and then there's that whole controversy about people like, oh yeah, game cartridge and game key cards and all that. People kind of attack Nintendo for no reason, because it's like, even if you buy a game disc, you know the game is not on the disc, right? You're playing a game like Call of Duty, that disc just serves like a DRM tool, right? It's just checking that you own the game, you know, and then it's like there's no data on that disc. It'll probably be like a small update, and then you have to download the whole game onto your hard drive. How many games are like that? Like Call of Duty. Why is Call of Duty 100 gigabytes? There's no way that 100 gigabytes are on that disc. It's downloaded from the internet onto your hard drive. The disc is effectively a key card, in the same way that you have the Nintendo Switch 2 key cards. And you kind of have to think about it from a collector's perspective, it sucks. But guess what? Collectors have been collecting these games that have no data on them on their disc anyway, regardless. So I don't really see it affecting game collection as such, because it doesn't make a difference, because people are already collecting games that have no data on those discs anyway. And this has been the case since the PS3. There were some PS3 games that you had to install onto your console, like GTA 5. People forget that. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit too excited over this, but let's just say this, right? If you're a games collector, it shouldn't affect you. And think about it this way. I think it's a move for Nintendo. Obviously, it benefits Nintendo, right? But it also benefits the games publishers and developers, right? Because you have to pay to put the game on the cartridge, and games can be large, they can be small, etc. And this way they can sort of, I would say, cut down on costs and save a little bit more money, and sort of standardize how games are on cartridges. And I believe this even happened on Nintendo Switch 1, where there were games that were on the cartridge, but the cartridge basically was a key card, and Nintendo didn't publish it like that, and it was just like how it was, you know, it was just mentioned that way, I guess, and no one cared. But people care now, because people like to hate on Nintendo. It's just cool and quirky if you hate on Nintendo, right? When everyone in the industry does it. And then people are like, well, no, Nintendo should be about value for gamers, and it's a family company. Yeah, but at the end of the day, they're a company. They need to make money. Like, that's just it. Oh, that's going to get me cancelled, isn't it? A lot of people are going to be like, how dare you, Bish? How dare you be on Nintendo's side? Are they paying you? No, I bought my Switch myself. I didn't even get a console from them. I did ask. They told me no, but it's fine. I have no hard feelings. I think people need to be fair with their criticism on games companies in general. Like, there is stuff that you can criticize Nintendo on, like legitimate stuff. Like, let's go back to the game keycards, right? The fact that they exist, I'm okay with, right? I'm not okay with how keycards work in terms of virtual keycards when you're sharing games, because that basically means if you've got one Switch or if you've got multiple Switches in one household, like back in the day, it used to be the case where if you logged into both Switches, you could play both games, and technically you could play both games at the same time. How? You had one account that was linked to one Switch, and that was the main account on the Switch, and then you'd be logged into another account. You'd be logged into the same account on another Switch that wasn't your main Switch. That game, if you're running it on the console that is not your main Switch, it will ask you to connect to the internet. If you're not connected to the internet, the game won't run, even if you're playing as another user on that console, right? And you could technically play the same game twice. That's how a lot of people kind of got around playing Animal Crossing. They would play it on both Switch consoles with one copy of the game. Now imagine if you're a family, right, and you've got multiple Switches and you want to play 2 copies of Mario Kart, you've got one digital copy. You'd basically have to, you know, give that copy, if you're in the same family unit on Nintendo Switch Online, you let them effectively borrow the game for a set number of weeks. I think it's like 2 weeks, I think it's the maximum or something like that, or a couple of days or whatever the limit is. But then you can't play the game because you've effectively borrowed the game. That sucks. And that's something that I don't like. Yes, in theory, not many people would be affected by it, but you gotta think about it like this as well. Like, imagine if you're someone like me who reviews games, right, where we'll have multiple consoles. You know, if we have a PS4 and a PS5, we will download our games onto the PS4 and the PS5 so that we can play it at the same time for reviews, right? Or if someone's going to be reviewing the same game, that's how we do it. And a lot of people do it like that. I think a lot of people on the PlayStation, there's a lot of mates of mine that they'll be logged in on both consoles and they'll be like, okay, we're getting the new Call of Duty, but it's £100 or whatever. Okay, you pay 50, I pay 50, and we both get this one game and we share it across 2 consoles, and they get to play it at the same time with one another. What happened to that? Let's bring that back, Nintendo. Sony can do it and they can figure it out. You know, let's do that. So that's a legitimate thing to be angry about, you know, because people were angry about that with Microsoft. I think it was like Microsoft back in the day with the Xbox One when they were talking about how you share games, and it was just horrible. I can't even remember what it was. And then Sony just floored them at E3 and they were like, this is how you share games on the PS4. And it was just literally a guy giving the other guy a disc, and that was it. So it was kind of funny. So anyway, besides the point, there is a lot of things that we can legitimately criticize Nintendo for. The fact that the UI is pretty much the same, it's not different. We were hoping for themes and things like that, but which can still happen. And the fact that the fact that you can't even use your actual SD cards, you have to use this new proprietary stupid nonsense SD cards. Well, they're not proprietary, they're just a new format of SD card, which is called micro SD card express, which I think they have higher read and write capabilities on these cards, which makes sense, right? I get that, but make it available in larger quantities, like larger sizes. We need that, because the SD card in my Switch at the moment, Switch 1, is a 512 gigabyte SD card, right? This SD card, the Express one, is 256, which is admittedly the same amount of storage that you get with the base Switch 2, which is fine, right? Because I think the original Switch had like 32 gigs of onboard storage, and you could barely fit like Breath of the Wild on that. Or I think that was the only game that you could fit on that, and that was it. So there is more base storage, but I review games, and even if I don't review games, if you had a large Switch 1 digital library, you want to bring all those games over. You don't want to re-download and do all that faff. So especially if you've got a slow internet connection. So, you know, you want those games on the go at any time. In America, for some reason, Walmart, with their on-brand, has higher capacity micro SD express cards for some reason, and so does GameStop. Why do they have their first party branded cards higher than what you can get in the UK? Like, I genuinely don't get it. Like, the only cards you can get in the UK at the moment are the Samsung cards and the SanDisk cards, which are basically the exact same micro SD card. They look exactly the same with the Mario branding on there. It's 256. To get a 512 gigabyte card is hard to find. I saw one being sold in Harrods and another one in Selfridges for £168. No one is going to pay that price. And that shouldn't be the price. I think it was an import or something, hence why the price was quite high. There is a Lexar one as well online, and it goes up to 1 terabyte. Now, if I could put a 1 terabyte card in my Nintendo Switch 2, I'd love it. As a games reviewer, as a journalist, it's fantastic because I want the most storage I can get, and I don't mind paying the price of the console to get more storage. For example, with my PS5, I think I've got 4 terabyte SSD in there. I paid more than what the console's worth to put that SSD in there, and I broke one of them. So I bought that SSD twice. Don't ask how I broke it. I was uninstalling it from a PC and it just cracked. And to be fair with you, that's my fault. I didn't mean to do that, but it happened. Anyway, what are my thoughts overall on the Switch 2? I love it. Performance is a lot better on previous games, like from the Switch 1 that had poor performance. So frame rates are pretty much unlocked effectively. So like a game like Bayonetta 2 and 3 and 1 even run very smooth on the Switch 2. And to be fair with you, if you play a lot of hack and slash and a lot of JRPGs and a lot of action RPGs like me, you're going to love the Switch 2. And I think, you know, especially if you play games like Hyrule Warriors, performance on Hyrule Warriors is good. Performance on any Musou game is just far better and very up to par with, you know, even the PlayStation 4 versions of those games and games that don't have PlayStation 4 versions like Zelda Musou. A lot of people were complaining about Age of Calamity. I gave Age of Calamity when it came out a 9 out of 10 and it lost 1 point because of frame rate issues. A lot of people didn't, you know, praise it that much because they couldn't get past certain points of the game because it was unplayable, and that was kind of true. So you can play Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity buttery smooth on the Nintendo Switch 2 without any frame rate issues. So get back into it. Get back into Age of Calamity. Get back into Hyrule Warriors. Get back into Three Houses. That's another game I've been playing. I've been playing Three Houses, Fire Emblem Three Houses, and you know what? I want a second Three Houses game. Forget about Three Hopes. Great Musou game, by the way. But let's bring back Fire Emblem Three Houses. Let's bring back Koei to actually make a decent Fire Emblem game, because you know what? Engage sucked. I'm sorry to say that. I actually absolutely hated Engage. I played like an hour of it and I'm like, what the hell is this game? Although some people actually do prefer it because it's kind of similar to like previous Fire Emblem games, like classic Fire Emblem games. But you know what? Give me back that Three Houses. Give me more of that. You know, that's what I'm looking for. And I was actually surprised that Koei knew how to make a Fire Emblem game. But you know what? They made the Aketsuden series as well, aka God Seekers. But yeah, they made the Aketsuden series, so they know what they're doing with tactical RPGs and stuff like that. So yeah, that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this episode and my thoughts on Nintendo Switch 2. Let me know, do you have a Switch 2? Are you getting a Switch 2? If not, tell me why. On Twitter, @GalPodcasts. Anyway, see you guys next week.